know. With that, I have Betsy Wille with me. Betsy and I have had a long relationship here, stemming back from the JP Morgan days, TIA days. Betsy then went off to become the CISO at Abbott, and is now a director at Chi Studios, running the cybersecurity studio, which Insight is a proud investor of. We'll probably touch more on that. So Betsy, welcome. Sorry you have to return to working with me again, but yeah, I'll let you kick it off here and let's get into it.
Awesome. So Steve, RSA conference, it was back in full force this year. Over 40,000 attendees, 700 speakers, and almost 600 vendors. And of course, veterans of the conference know a lot of the action actually takes place outside of Moscone. So the unofficial RSA party list listed 91 social events between Monday and Wednesday. Some of those big names were George W. Bush, Lenny Kravitz, Seinfeld. In Insight Scale-Up Suite, we hosted the former ambassador of Russia, Michael McFaul. I moderated a panel with Bank of America's CISO, Craig Froelich, and Raytheon CTO, Daniel Conroy. And on Wednesday night, we had Sugar Ray and the Sugar Hill Gang. So, RSA, a lot happening as always. One stat that we don't have, though, is the average number of steps taken by attendees throughout the conference. Steve, what was yours? Do you know?
I maxed out at 17,000. I do remember that on one day, but a lot less this time around. Just being on the investor side and having the suite, I was a little spoiled because we got to have people come to us and leverage the suite. So yeah, I actually got workouts in because I didn't have as many steps as the past. But yeah, it's so big, it's so spread out. I think that's one of the challenges of San Francisco in a way, is just having that space in between meetings. I think a great stat would be for people to ask us or tell us how late they were to each meeting, because I remember being on that side of it and just constantly being late because of the amount of time and distance in between sites. But yeah, a little easier for me this year.
I have to agree. I mean, I still clocked in a good amount of steps across the time. But what was notable for me was I didn't do it in heels this time. I have in the past, and one silver lining of the pandemic is no heels, flat, totally acceptable. And so I saved my feet a little bit.
Yeah.
So we have a lot to unpack about the conference. Let's start though with just breaking down the attendees. So those 40,000 people that are attending and registered, they're not all the same. They're not all cybersecurity practitioners or one category. So help us understand who's there and what are they hoping to get from attending?
Yeah, and look, we talked about this earlier. 40,000 people that are registered at the event. I wonder how many hotel rooms were actually occupied. My guess it's probably 10 or 20,000 more that don't even register for the event, don't even go down on the floor. I mean, I haven't been on the floor in probably like 5 or 6 years. How much of this takes place outside of it. And yeah, and look, I think the four categories that we're always putting this is you have the usual, right, the predominant amount of operators that are there. And it's not all C-suites. I love seeing, CISOs plus or minus, 3-4 levels down. You've got the sellers, right? The vendors, and that's usually the coming attraction, right? Is the floor and being able to have that many people in that small of an area, you can really bang out 30, 40 meetings with security companies there. But I was very surprised at the amount of bankers that were there, which I think is going to be telling as we get, more into M&A season and hopefully over the next 18 months into actual IPO season, and VCs, right, being on the other side now and sitting in the VC world, I paid attention a lot more than I used to on like how many other venture capital firms are there and how much sourcing is done by us. Operators are looking at this going, hey, is this something I can plug in? And the VCs are standing right behind them going, is this something you can plug in? Because if so, this is something I would invest in. So it was great to see all four categories there working together.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part is oftentimes, and I know I always attended as a practitioner up until this year, and or operators, you would say, and so you kind of, that's the world I knew. I knew there were vendors and us, but really opening up and understanding the dynamics of the broader marketplace and the commercial space of cybersecurity these days, and who's there and how they're looking at it through a lens. So sometimes you can kind of say, well, I don't know why they do it this way, or I don't know why it's set up like this. And then you come to realize, oh, that's right. I'm not the only one coming to the conference for something.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it took me a little bit to realize that, because I just came in, right? I had my 3 or 4 directs with me, and I came in and I had my 40 vendors that I wanted to meet with. And I wanted to come out of it with down selecting,
Yeah.
to help us with the strategy. And yeah, now I'm starting to see it's a bit of a bigger world than what I used to see.
Yeah. But so let's dive into that operator, vendor, buyer, seller dynamic, because that is the world that we've existed in for a long time. I now spend a lot of time with those CISOs and their leadership team and the ones that were at RSA too. Really, I would say these days, look at it more as a trade show, looking at new products, than a conference to exchange information ideas. That happens through the sessions. It's just a little bit different audience. And so they come in, they set their meetings up well in advance. If you're really on the ball, you're really starting that process probably in January, February. In fact, to think about who do you want to see, what do you want to see, how do you want to use your time there. And because it's so busy, you've got to set those up in advance. So they come in with that agenda. Those that I talked to primarily, it was about, the intention was about 50% spend time with solution providers that they already have a relationship with, 50% new. At the end of the conference, most said that they spent more time with new than they did with existing, which was how I think you and I always approached it, because it was like, I can meet with my existing partners anytime. But the one thing that I did hear, and I can relate to this a bit, is that there is a lot that the practitioners, they want to kind of come in and almost treat it like a car show, and this idea of like, want to walk around, see what's new, see, where the concept cars of the future, be able to compare the new EVs across different automakers, but nobody's expecting anybody to leave a car show buying 15 new cars. They're really just kind of getting ideas for whenever the time is to buy that next solution. But a lot of practitioners do walk away from the RSA conference feeling like they're kind of outnumbered and they have a sales target on their back, and that there is maybe this expectation that they are going to go and make purchases for a lot of things, or POC a lot of products right away. So your thoughts, Steve? Agree, disagree? Where do you weigh in on
I
that?
agree. I think RSA is number one. I think there's too many companies there. I think the feeling of being overwhelmed as a buyer is not a good one. I don't like that we leave, RSA exhausted. I'd rather see us leave energized. And I've been to certain smaller venues, smaller conferences and things like that, where you leave energized and you're motivated and you're optimistic. I always sort of felt like I left exhausted. And I think there's some of that is just the fact that there's so much noise and so much sensory overload to sort of get through. Not everyone has the capability and the infrastructure to, vet and set up 40 meetings before you get there. Some people just go, right? And it's sort of ad hoc and you're, oh, wow, this is kind of interesting at this booth. I think it's really hard to be organized that way and have something matched to your strategy. Because of the timing of where RSA is positioned, I think it's tough, because I actually wish RSA was later in the year, because I wish that you come back in September off of, the summer and the vacations, and then you start working on your strategy and your roadmap for the next year to 18 months. And I'd almost rather have my strategy and roadmap sort of solidified in a way, and then immediately go to an RSA and go, oh, what technologies map to that? Most of us, when we get to RSA, like, we're months in, right, to our strategy and roadmap. Now, we haven't bought everything, so there's still room, but Black Hat is actually positioned a little bit better to go, okay, for the next year, what do I really want to look at, and where is my strategy and roadmap going? So I think it's tough timing in some ways. I hate that we're so overwhelmed. I think there's just too many companies there. So I wish there was a bit more of a stringent vetting process. Not every company needs to be there, right? So I love, like what you said before, and I know we talked about this earlier, I'd almost rather have it where it was sectioned off, where I could go to one section of the floor that's cloud, right? Maybe one section of the floor that's maybe vulnerability management or data protection or IAM. Like, cut this thing up for me so that I can map it more organically to what my roadmap looks like.
That's right.
Maybe I just want to spend the majority of my time in IAM, and because that's my biggest pain point, it's where my budget is, and I
Yeah.
can have much better conversations there. I hate that shotgun effect for this. I think we just try to meet with a ton, and you try to get in as much as you can. And I think it's really hard to sell that way from a vendor standpoint, because you're not necessarily competing against a competitor as a buyer. You're competing against priorities.
Yeah.
And that makes it really difficult sometimes to know whether or not we're just relationship building or whether or not I'm really selling. Like, you're not really signing deals out there. Abnormal, I think, is the only one I've heard just when they were out there, they actually signed a deal and it was in the works for a year. But you're not really signing deals. You're building trust, you're building relationships, you're getting sort of keyed in a little bit on, wow, this is something I'm interested in. But the majority of the time, I'd say 90%, you're like, yeah, this isn't going to be for me or my company. And you're sort of ditching those things there. So it's tough.
What I
It's so big. It's hard to get through.
Yeah, and what I like about that too, or that idea of having it, the space categorized a little bit more, the products together, is also, we often have so much focus on the CISO and get the CISO and the executive in the meeting. But, certainly as my time, it was my senior leaders, my leadership team that brought me the new solutions, the ideas, and they were more focused in specific areas, whether that be that, architect and engineering on our cloud strategy and what we need to fill there, or SOC on, automation and new monitoring tools. So also being able to allow my leadership team to go and set their own agenda and actually cover much more territory by them having their own meetings. When I would go with you, we had a little bit of our own time, but there was a feeling of like you're in this entourage that goes around all together. And so what we were doing with some of the senior leaders at RSA this year with the Cyber Studio was saying, let's just, where are you going? How do you guys kind of pair up a little bit to have your own agenda? And then you actually can cover so much more territory. But, when it's just all mixed together, it can be a little hard to coordinate.
Yeah, it's funny. We talked about this a while ago before RSA. I would have actually paid for like a white glove service. Like, I would have, if someone called me in January and said, hey, we're going to offer a service that actually plans out your RSA week. We're going to match it to your strategy, and we're going to feed you like the top 3 or 4 companies in that space. We're going to help you get from point A to point B in an appropriate amount of time, so you're not late for everything. Like, I would have paid for that. Even if the company would have, I would have paid for it out of my own money, just to make it smoother for me. That very much matched what my architects wanted, what my ops folks wanted, and what the strategy was. I think you can do that, but most of us don't have the time or the energy or the teams to do it. So
that's right. Yeah. You also have to have your EA who is experienced in having sent teams, for multiple years, to know how it all operates and when to get started and how to coordinate. I think they're the critical piece.
Yeah.
I see a question in the chat, which I want to pull on because I'm curious about this too. So Paul Lewis asks, thoughts on paying a lot of money for a booth when the floor is such a circus? And I like that question, because here's what I'll tell you that I heard from the operator side is that, there, again, this idea of kind of feeling overwhelmed with that expo floor, even just figuring out what the product is, because you've got these big elaborate displays and, so what do they do? Gimmicks to get you pulled in, but you don't know exactly what they are. It's loud. And so there may be passively going through the floor, but not really engaging to find and discover something new and innovative there. So, Steve, what is your thought? What are you hearing about the value of being on the expo floor as a company, as a vendor?
Yeah. So Paul, thanks for that. We may have actually had this debate a couple of times leading up to RSA. I think it depends on what stage you are as a company. I'd actually like to see the earlier stage companies that are seed, early A's, spend the money elsewhere. I think there's too many of those. But if you take actually Torque is a great example. Like, I think they had something like 80, 100 meetings get scheduled right from their booth. Right? They had like a little iPad out there and you could pick your time and slot and schedule your meeting right there. That to me is like immediate action, solidified follow through, like all of that. So I think it's valuable. But I think the price that you pay, not just for the booth, but for the whole week, the amount of money that some folks pay, no, I don't think it's really valuable for everyone. I think you have to really pick your poison. I think if you end up in the back left-hand corner, right? Like, what is it really getting you like a ton of value yet? But you get into the later stage where you're at like 30 million in revenue, things like that. Yeah, like you can get a bit of an advantage and you can really get some good leads that come out of it. And I think, again, now being on this side, you realize like what happens down on the floor is not just between buyer and vendor. Trust me, these vendors do recon like crazy on each other, right? You're sending people to someone else's booth, to a competitor's booth. They're taking a look, they're listening to you speak, on the microphone and talk about your product. They're going back to their booth and they're like, oh, so-and-so's working on this. There's a lot of like intelligence gathering on that floor as a whole, not just buyer seller. They're looking strategically. People are counting, right? And going, wow, like IAM is like exploded. Why did it seem like there were more identity companies than last year, or data companies, or this year is like, and certainly next year is going to be this whole like generative AI and you're going to see a million companies there. Those are leading indicators, right, of where the market's going and maybe what the buyers want. But I think early on, I would much rather have you get a suite, use our suite, and actually have you generate that interest prior and just have people come and have a nice quiet conversation. Because early on, early stage companies aren't really selling that much at RSA. What you're really looking for is feedback. I wish I knew that earlier in my career, where like, sometimes you're meeting with companies, you're not selling to me. I'm not going to buy your thing. You're not ready for, let's say, a large enterprise. But can I give you a ton of advice on how to get you there? Yeah, that collectively helps the community. If you do that with 5 different companies, it sort of teaches those founders and gives them advice on how to get there. I'd rather see that done in quieter settings, for you to be like, hey, I have a product. We're just starting now to get market fit. What do you think about this? Should I go in this direction? Should I go in that direction? I love those more innovative conversations. And I think CISOs and their directs are more apt to have those when you're not being sold to, right? And it's just ask me for advice and I'll give you free advice and hopefully it works for you. You build a trusting relationship. You can sell to me a year from now, when you're ready for me and I have a strategy that matches to it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I would say that I heard that from a number of our partners in the studio as well, that really are excited about the innovations coming out and the ideas that are coming, into the market now. But they also have really strong points of view about what are they dealing with day in, day out, and the challenges that they're facing as operators. And so having that space to connect on those without it having to, you go, oh, I'm going to have that follow up, every week on the week of, are you ready to have ready for the POC? But rather just an exchange of information. I think that's the kind of exchange for information that those leaders want to have, versus maybe sitting in a presentation during the conference, but like exchange founder to practitioner VC to practitioner, what are today's challenges and where they're looking to the future and what should they be thinking about for the future. So they really want to have those conversations. I'll tell you that, being in the scale up suite for Insight, it was such a comfortable space. We had a number of people come through as well and just had great conversations and not felt the pressure of kind of the spinning conference around it.
Yeah, and I used to say it then, and I even say it now, like, you don't sell me anything. I don't care how good you are in sales. You're not selling me anything. You're certainly not selling me anything at RSA. I'll buy it. I'm buying this stuff. Like, we're smart enough and we know the space well enough that, like, you don't really have to sell me anything. Like, I know what I want, right? Now, you may guide me a little bit, 10, 20-degree drift here and there, or I may get it down to 2, and then it's like, okay, which tech is better? But I never liked being sold to at RSA. I don't like being sold to now, right? I liked having innovative type conversations about the art of possible. And if those went really well, yeah, probably map you to something and buy it. I think we also make the mistake, and those CISOs may love or hate this comment, but like, constantly hearing this thing of like, how do we get to CISOs? One day, the vendors are going to realize that the CISOs don't really buy anything.
Mm-hmm.
What we buy is the relationship and the trust with the executive team. Our teams buy things.
Right.
So that's why I do like the way RSA precedes Black Hat in a way, because if you can build the relationship between executive teams, then you get people to fall in love with the tech at Black Hat, where it's like a little bit further down in the org where they go. But I just never really liked being sold to. I think we have a question on there. Do we have these conversations with the show organizers? The answer is yes. So I know, actually, Betsy and I both know Kylie well, the new CEO of the RSA management team. So Kylie had a bunch of conversations leading up to. She just got in that seat. So it's really, everything was in flight for this year. Kylie's amazing. She's got a lot of experience in the space, and I think she's gonna really look long and hard at certain aspects of it. But if you know me or know Betsy at all, neither one of us hold our tongues too well. So yeah, we're vocal. And look, in some of these things we may not be right. There's bigger pictures out there, and other people may have other opinions. But like, I'm waiting to talk to her again to even talk about like the innovation awards and things like that, and the companies that get in front of them, and even trying to do more there on you can be innovative at very old tech, right? So you can be very innovative in the vulnerability management space right now, even at a later stage. So there's a lot of input that we're giving them, and look, they're hopefully they take some of it, but it's a pretty big conference. So
and as you said at the beginning, there's a lot of audience there too, and so there is, we're talking a lot here about CISOs and their leadership team and the founders and their companies, but you do have a lot of attendance. There are 700 sessions and speakers presenting, and people sitting in those audiences and learning. And whether that's somebody earlier in their cyber career or, at a company that has fewer kind of resources to buy all the latest tech, that's happening too. And that's a big part of the community. And you can't just focus on the large companies, because guess what? Those smaller companies, the ones that don't have as big of a budget, are critical to the supply chains and operations of a lot of our entire economy. So, that's the other part of it. There are a lot of audiences. It is the biggest cybersecurity event of the year. And so meeting everybody's needs is going to be challenging no matter what. But I think the real insights, the conversation we're having here and outside of here are important to continue to improve it. And get people to come back. So we also have a question from Trevor to follow on the early stage conversation. RSA has an early stage expo. Do you have any experience with this? Is it good venue for the Series seed companies to get feedback, or still too noisy? And I think I would imagine this is this is the floor, that's kind of set aside for the very early stage companies.
Yeah, there's a couple things that happen in the beginning, even like some of like the CISO specific events that they have, um, some of the innovation sessions that they have. There's some really, really good work there. It's actually what I'm talking about is expanding on that and doing more of that.
Yeah,
Um, I would even trim down the speaking engagements if you needed time to do it and get more into that innovation piece and
yeah,
do more there. Um, Sometimes we innovate, right? We consider something as early adoption as innovation. So the only thing I would maybe push back on a
hmm,
little bit there is like, I've been to those, like they're not that innovative, right? Innovation is supposed to be forward looking.
yeah,
So innovative to me would be like a year ago, we had some sessions or some separate areas on generative AI. To have it now is not that innovative, folks. It's like
right,
you're becoming an early adopter, right? And like I'm watching all these, sort of startups pop up and these founders pop up in the space. All right, that's not really that innovative. We could certainly do that, but there's a debate on whether or not it's innovative or early adopter. I think we could do a little bit of both and be
yeah,
much more innovative on where we think the market is going. um, you could have taken RSA and said, hey, we're going to have sessions on generative AI and how that's going to change data protection, right? That's innovative. No one's doing that now. But saying that you integrated your technology with ChatGPT, it's a bit gimmicky, right? It's not that
yeah,
innovative. So I'm not really talking about that area. So I think it's how you define it. But I would love to have sections there. There are some people that are going to want to go there and meet with the largest publicly traded cybersecurity companies in the world, and they're going to want to dig deep and think about whether or not they're going to go there. And then there's the opposite end of the
great.
spectrum, that I'd love to think of all the operators and all the collective intelligence between the bankers and what they see, the operators, the founders. If you could really channel that to say, where is the market going? How much money could we
Yeah.
save in optail and tech spend that eventually becomes vaporware for us? Like I would have loved that, back in the day.
Yeah. Well, when I was talking with someone recently, it was what you're saying. I again equate it somewhat to the car show, but like the concept car space. Like
Yeah.
nobody expects those cars to hit the road anytime soon and actually be drivable, but this is where cars are going, and this is where what you're going to see out there, and from the mechanics of it to the body style to the electric versus whatever, and so it's a section like that I would love, and not necessarily tucked in the second floor to find the
Yeah.
elevator, on the west side, but actually predominantly showcased. And again, several of the CISOs that I talked to, they also were interested in that. They went to the innovation sandbox, and there were some really interesting companies highlighted there, but it wasn't that left of, that was, they were still looking for kind of the stealth. And again, those really new ideas that they would have spent some time there, maybe not all their time, because they got to also be practical, but they want to be thinking about that, take that back
Yeah.
to their companies.
Yeah.
Great. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit.
Yep.
The conference is over. We're now about 2 weeks out from it, but what, everybody kind of goes back to the real world at the end of it, energized, some new ideas, saw some people they really excited about, but the real world hits. You got to dig out from email. You have to, get caught up on work. I'd say operators tend to start to block the emails coming from just the badge scans that they just wanted to get the swag from. You know, what what are you telling Steve, talking to your portfolio companies about, and how to turn those leads from the conference into actual prospects?
Yeah. Look, again, if we had to list, this is probably top three, maybe even top two challenges of RSA, is you have all these great ideas that come out of it. And I get back to the office on Monday and that stuff just slowly starts to dissipate.
Yeah.
Even with the budgets I've managed over the years and all Fortune 100s, still, we were not good at, okay, we're back now. We used to call them like trip reports. Like, let's get the trip reports together. Let's have a conversation, even like an hour conversation of like, who do we really want to latch onto? What POVs do we want to start? What other conversations do we want to have? As operators, we just get back into the mix, and we don't go from idea to idea generation into execution and all of that. It's actually, it's an organic plug, I would say, on why we invested in you guys, is because that was the whole idea around this. Like, let us take what you learn, those top 3 things from the conference, and let's help you build on that and actually put things into production and make things better for you from an operation standpoint. That's one of those things, you come out exhausted and you get in there and you get right back into your email and you get right back into your projects. And I remember being like 3 months later being like, oh, I remember that company. We met with them at RSA. It's like, I wish we were better at it. I wish I was better at the follow through on what comes of it. So I think it's hard for being on the other end and being on the security vendor side, is you're going to get inundated with all of these emails as soon as you get out of RSA. And most of them will be companies that you never met with, right? They're just marketing campaigns. So how do you stand out from everyone else to be like, hey, we met, we had a great conversation, you expressed interest. To me, that has to happen like at RSA.
Yeah.
And it's almost like trying to get like another follow-up, even if it's at a bar, right? I've done more deals at bars than I think I have in conference rooms, right? Where it's like, hey, we met 2 days ago, and just building on that relationship, because the operators are just overwhelmed. As soon as you get back, it's pretty overwhelming. I like trying to set up those meetings in the moment. Like I was mentioning Torque before, like get me right then and there, get with my EA right then and there, and get that stuff set up. Now, don't set it up for next week. I'm going to cancel it, right? Set it up for 3 weeks out, set it up for 4 weeks out. Ask me like, hey, are you ready for this now to have these conversations? Or from a roadmap standpoint, you're not going to be ready for 6 months. And I'm, by the way, constantly telling our founders, like, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you listen twice as much as you speak. Like, ask the question and take the feedback. I may look at you and be like, wow, I love this. I love you guys as a team. I love the tech. I would buy this in 2 seconds. But man, ask me, is that now? Is that 3 years from now? Do you have 10 other things that you have to do before you get there? Do you not have the ops team ready to even handle the output? Try to get it set up, locked in right there, but give the operators like 3 weeks to take a deep breath and get caught up, because then you're just going to get lost in the noise. And I think, that's a good way to just sort of fade away. And then you got to circle back again at Black Hat, which now you just, lost 4 months.
And I'd add a couple things to that. One is just in the logistics of it. I think it doesn't hurt to send a note saying, great meeting you, good conversation around X, so it triggers their memory. I'm going to follow up with you in about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, when the dust is settled, because it leaves the impression the EA that's watching in the email goes, oh yeah, I've seen that email address come across, not immediately block it. And it also, tips the hat that you recognize what they're going back into. You just wanted to make sure that, you knew this was a good conversation, and we'll get back with you when you have some time. The other thing that I offer is, from experience, to your point about getting back and the timing of it, is a lot of it is also about just companies having to figure out their approach. So, a product is a product, and you can buy it, but that does not account for, have you thought through what other stakeholders are going to be impacted by putting a new solution in place? Who else do you need to get aligned? What is your approach? Are you going to try to roll this out now, in a year, over a year? Is it tying into other business strategies? Like, the approach that this solution fits into, and the broader program has to also be solidified. So, some of the conversations I would have with a new company, say, oh, that's really interesting. How that would help? We've got this other thing that we've been thinking about, and it might actually start to shape my approach, but I'm not ready to buy anything or POC anything for 6 more months, because we've got to go kind of refigure that program or get the funding in place. In other cases, maybe it's fully formed and we went in to say, I want to narrow this down to the 2 or 3 POCs because this project is happening and we're supposed to kick it off pretty soon. So it's also, to your point, having those conversations and asking where this fits into their broader strategy and approach, not just, you know, do you have a problem with vulnerability management? We can solve it. Everybody's got the problem. Doesn't mean that they have a solution and approach ready to go.
Yeah, it's a fire ready aim mentality from founders, right? It's just, I'm so excited that you're sitting in front of me that I lose my mind on actually how to kind of get you more interested. And I still see it today. And I'm, like I said, I'm constantly giving the advice of like, ask a lot of questions up front. Like a lot of these operators are exhausted because everyone assumes what they know. I remember the days of like, oh, here are the threats. And I used to look at them and be like, you think I don't know what they are? I live this every day. I know them better than you do. Like, don't tell me what my threats are. Don't tell me what my risks are. Like, tell me what the opportunity is for me. Like the opportunity to solve a problem, but you don't know what that is until you ask me and listen. And I think too many CROs and sales folks and everything, they're not listening first. And I think a lot of the operators would really like to talk first, right? And be like, hey, here's the unique thing for me in my environment and what the business is challenged with. And then cater that to, oh, okay, like, I think I can help you. Or God forbid someone looks at you and just goes, I can't. This is not the solution for you. Right. Let's move on to something else. I'd have a lot more respect for folks if it went that way.
What that actually brings to mind, one other thought I had is an interesting question that could be asked of an operator is, who is your number one stakeholder or partner in the organization that you have to get support for this on? And can you make an introduction there? I'd love to talk to them, because the idea of being these days, particularly with the budgets the way they are, being able to create a kind of a dual business case, not just cyber bringing one more solution to get funded, but actually it's cyber plus the app dev team or the cloud, you know, office, or, you know, the OT, you know, manufacturing space. Those are the cases that are so much easier for the cyber leader to get through. So asking that question of who else not in cyber can we meet with to try to win their business, be an interesting thing to try.
Yeah, we always call, I do this too. I make this mistakes and we call them buyers, and we shouldn't, because depending at the person that you're talking to, some are influencers, some are buyers, some are signers, right? Some, you know, you're talking to someone who has signature authority, like, okay, I should be approaching them and having different conversations with them than I am the actual influencers and the buyers and all of that. Like, we're getting into a world now where not only is that happening across security, but it's happening across functions.
Yeah.
So, like AppSec with companies like Bionic or DAS, you're like, okay, well, you're an influencer. Okay, but you sit in DevOps or app dev. You don't even sit in security, and you're a major influencer of this project. I think all of that we have to learn. It'd be nice to get some of those folks actually to conferences like this and get a little input outside of security. It's really hard to shift left when 40,000 people that come to RSA are just security people. I'd like to see some, because you get that with like Amazon's or AWS's like reInvent and things like that. I love things like that because it's a mix of buyers where it's like DevOps, cloud, infrastructure, security. They're much more holistic conversations.
Yeah, just side note story on that of I won't mention the company, but there was a solution we had put in cloud security space before I left, and I got a call from the CRO after I left Abbott saying, you know, we got to move this forward, or kind of, you know, just make it, you know, the company has to make a decision on this. What should we do? And it had been in, you know, kind of POC for almost a year. I said, pull it out. Tell them that it's time to pull it out, because I guarantee you, I know the app dev team loves it, and they will come back and find some money and help get that business case forward. Just, you know, tell them it's time to pull it out of the environment. And sure enough, that is what happened, because it had been built a following on that other side. I said, you got to help the cyber team get more voices, so it's not just one more cybersecurity spend.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we've got a couple minutes left. So in the time that we have left, I don't see any necessarily new questions yet. So let's turn to the future and kind of either what would you like to see out of RSA next year, or predictions of what we might see? You know, what we've talked a little bit about, you know, opportunities there, but anything we didn't cover?
Yeah, I mean, look, the advice I give doesn't always make people money, so I'll say that first with something like this, because I just like to see less of it. I'd like to see less people there. I'd like to see less vendors there. It's such a great opportunity because everyone's in a city all at once. So you can get so much done in such a short period of time. That's the actual real value for me.
That's right.
Everybody's going to be there. I can bang out 40 meetings that would typically take me 12 months to do. But there are some advantages to making it a bit harder to get in, right? And trimming things down a little bit, I think it's controversial, right? I get it, but not everyone from a vendor standpoint, not everyone from a buyer standpoint should be there. I think it's gotten so big that it dilutes the importance of what we get out of it. And to your point, it used to be a security conference that is now a trade show. And those things are treated very, very differently, and we get different things out of them. And I miss the days of when it was a security conference. I miss the days of coming from it and being like, wow, I heard this talk and holy cow, I can like really think of like 3 things I can do. We talked a little bit about cutting up the expo floor to be much more, I don't know, just overlay Gartner on it. And that could be dangerous. I get it, because you'd have 8,000 rooms, but you could actually cut this up a little bit so that I could avoid 2/3 of it, because my strategy only maps to like these 2 or 3 domains. Love the concept car idea. Like, would love to walk onto a floor and be like, wow, this looks amazing. Probably never ever going to get there, but it's really cool and it's thought provoking. Or I can't wait till it does get there and it may be 40% drift from it. You know, look, San Fran's tough. You can't talk about RSA without talking about the city. It's a tough city to have a conference in nowadays. You know, we might get more out of it if it was sort of a larger event from a building standpoint, and you could contain everything in one building. Having to leave and go into the hotels and all of that, that's part of the exhausting part. Like, there are events at night that I have skipped where I've just been like, I'm going to bed.
Yeah.
It's because I'm walking all over the city and I'm getting old.
And getting older.
Yes. So my feet hurt. I wouldn't mind trying to find a location where it was like you could really set up a lot of these rooms within the event rather than setting up suites in hotels, and really contain it a little bit more so that you could go to a lecture and then go right to 3 vendor meetings. You can't do that right now. It's just very, very spread out, because it's gotten so darn big. But, you know, look, easy for us to say, hard for us, you know, anyone to do when you're trying to make money and you're trying to accommodate everyone. You could even make an argument, maybe there's some room for something else at a different point in the year. Or maybe it's something that we get out of Black Hat that we don't get out of RSA, and we're looking at it holistically. FSI SAC, you know, some of the other ISACs, there's other things that we can get out of it. What I don't like is having that feeling that a lot of these are just repetitive. I wish we could kind of work a little bit more together to be like, I'm going to RSA to get X out of it. I'm going to Black Hat to get Y. And then I'm going to go to a couple Gartner things to get Z. Right now,
or my team.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's tough.
We are at time. So I think we will, you know, we'll come back in a year and see if any of those ideas have made their way into the RSA conference and take a look at it again. But this has been great. It is always nice coming back together with you, Steve, and talking all things cyber and RSA conference and this world that we live in.
Definitely. I'll see you there next year.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.